here's a little bit about Larry Carter. Larry Carter is the president of the Louisiana Federation of Teachers. Carter is also a vice president of the American Federation of Teachers. Following the retirement of former LFT president Steve Monahan, Larry served as acting president for 6 months. He was elected as full-time president in 2016. Larry began his teaching career in 1993 at Murray Henderson Elementary School on the West Bank of New Orleans. He chose Murray Henderson because he felt he could serve as a role model to the boys, many of whom came from single-parent households. He became an active member of UTNO his first year as a teacher. He later became a member of UTNO's Executive Council. After teaching for 7 years, he was offered the opportunity to serve both children and his fellow educators as a staff representative for the union. He served as a grievance specialist and eventually became the organizing director. His work for his union allowed him to extend solidarity across all New Orleans school systems, New Orleans public schools, the Recovery School District, and charter schools. He has dedicated his life to advocating for others. His mission is to ensure that the voices of professional educators in Louisiana, whether teachers, paraprofessionals, or clericals, continue to be heard. He believes that when educators have a seat at the table, students also have a seat at the table. Larry lives in New Orleans with his wife, Tawanda, and their daughter, Kai. All right, welcome, Larry.
First, I want to say thank you for inviting me. And I also want to say I would like to say at this time to all the veterans, whether at home or abroad, active duty reserve, retired, even those who cannot be with us any longer, thank you for your service to our country. At this time, I'm very excited about what I see in government today. Finally, after decades of budget tricks and neglecting public education funding, Louisiana is moving towards a sustainable, stable budget, at least for the next 7 years. With the fiscal cliffs pushed back to 2025, it's time to begin making meaningful investments in the future of Louisiana's children and to the dedicated teachers and paraprofessionals and school-related personnel of whom we entrust our children to every day. In the state, if we had kept funding the 2.75% inflation factor to the minimum foundation program for K-12 schools, the per pupil spending would be about $1,223 higher today. Studies show that Louisiana has suffered loss of at least $1 billion in higher education, this funding usually probably since 2008. When we talk about the K-12 teacher salaries, looking at just teacher salaries, the last time a significant pay raise was approved, it was in 2007, when Governor Blanco signed a $2,375 pay raise. Louisiana's average K-12 teacher salaries actually declined by about $2,000 between 2012 and 2016. Louisiana teacher salaries reached parity with other southern states in 2007. According to the Southern Regional Education Board, our average salaries reached a high watermark in 2012 and 2013 at $51,381. But by 2015-16, the last year that figures were actually available, our average salary plunged to $49,745. That year, the Southern average was $50,955, and the national average was $58,363. Now, while we often talk about teacher salaries, we also must bring to bear, there's two other categories of employees that usually get neglected: our paraprofessional and school-related personnel, and higher ed personnel as well. Our paraprofessional and school-related personnel salaries, when you think about it, there's no real state salary schedule for those non-certified school employees. Their salaries are mainly determined by local school district policy, although there have been some state pay raises for PSRPs in the past. Often, they've been one-time adjustments, although a few of them may have been incorporated into the MFP. Aggressive lobbying by the Louisiana Federation of Teachers, including a rally in 2007 and a legislative wall of shame campaign in 2008, resulted in $1,000 pay raises during each of those 2 years. There have been no state raises for school employees since then. Even though other costs, like insurance, has continued to rise. Those costs end up eating a large percentage of those school employees' income because of their low salaries. Many of them live below poverty level and depend on the social safety net services such as food stamps, Medicaid to provide for their families. It is shameful that people we trust with the safety and welfare of our children often earn less than $20,000 a year at a full-time job. And as I spoke earlier about higher education salaries, state funding for colleges and universities have plunged by 43.4% since the Great Recession of 2008. At that same time, the other states increased higher education funding by 3%. And according to the Regional Education Board, our funding for higher education is 42% below the Southern average. And our state has the lowest per student funding of the 16 Southern states. The result has hit students and faculty especially hard. Tuition and fees have skyrocketed, adding to the burden of debt faced by our young citizens. Many are leaving the state to get their college degrees in states that offer a better tuition package. Tuition has increased by 59% in our four-year colleges, 6 times the national average. The effect on pay for college teachers is devastating. Four-year faculty salaries are $12,104 below the Southern Regional average. Two-year faculty salaries are $7,480 below the Southern Regional average, and technical college salaries are $2,650 below the Southern Regional average. What's more, many of our best college professionals have left the state, taking with them research grants and programs worth millions of dollars. What we want. The state is long overdue in making a meaningful investment in K-12 education, which is why Governor John Bel Edwards committed to increasing the funding to the MFP and raising pay for teachers and support personnel to the Southern Regional average. LFT and the governor will work with all legislators during the 2019 session and beyond to elevate the profession of teaching and highlight its importance in growing our state's talent pipeline and economy. We will know more about what is achievable in the 2019 session when the Revenue Estimating Conference issues a report. In any case, LFT will work with all stakeholders to create a 2 to 3 year plan to raise teacher and support employee salaries to meet the Southern Regional average, and then move beyond it. Our economy is starting to roll again, and we cannot continue to make the mistakes of the past. It is time to make up our losses, invest in our schools, and make decisions about education, the cornerstone of our future development in our state. LFT will push for not only a salary increase, but for putting a number on the actual cost of educating Louisiana's children and the money to fully fund these investments in the future. To begin with, we want the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to ask for an annual increase in the K-12 funding of at least 2.75% per year. We demand that the legislature fund the increases. Half of that will be dedicated to annual pay raises. We want a dedicated funding stream to ensure that salaries continue to rise along with the cost of living and to keep up with advances in other states. Now, we did a survey sometime last year, and in that survey we kind of asked, what would educators be willing to do? And a significant majority of Louisiana teachers are willing to take job actions if leaders fail to adjust the losses to educators that they've suffered over the past decade. A recent survey that we did showed that teachers are fed up, not just about low pay, because they're also fed up about a lack of resources, crumbling facilities, poor student discipline, and a lack of parent involvement. Now, in this survey, nearly 4,000 teachers from 73 local education agencies responded to our survey. It was taken between April 17 and about May 7th. And we asked, which of these steps are you willing to take to win significant pay raises? 61% answered statewide walkouts, and 59% said mass demonstrations at the state capitol in Baton Rouge. 78% of the teachers said they have considered leaving the profession because of low pay. Told that teacher salaries in Louisiana are paid from a combination of local and state sources, the vast majority, 84%, said that raises should come from both and not just from the state or the local school board. 79% said that local industrial tax exemptions should be limited in order to pay and to fund pay raises from local school boards as well. And 82% say that the state should limit business tax exemptions and rebates in order to fund pay raises from the state. Over half, 59%, said they would support a small state income tax increase to fund state raises. Fewer than half, about 42%, said they would support sales or property taxes for local pay raises. Teachers was also asked to rank 6 issues that they believe are the most important ones facing their schools today. For 53% of them, salaries topped the list. Discipline was ranked at the top by 40%. Building conditions, 38%. Parental involvement, 35%. Teacher evaluations, 31%. And school safety, 29%. Now, we often talk, just like many of you do, about the long-term fiscal goals of our state. And so we're very happy again that the budget deal that was reached in 2018 after special session created a stable, sustainable budget, but it did so with regressive sales taxes and will only be in effect until 2025. While it was certainly better than nothing, and it did stop us from falling off the quote-unquote fiscal cliff at the time, it really just kicked the can down the road for later legislative sessions to deal with. To achieve our goal, legislators should accept the recommendation of the task force on structural changes and budget and tax policy and address Louisiana's structural tax problems. Doing this will help to ensure that there is sufficient revenue investments into the future of our children. The 71-page report issued in January of 2017 had some important recommendations that affect public education. It recommended a formal multi-year spending forecast for the MFP. It recommended looking for ways to accelerate the paydown of the unfunded accrued liabilities in the state's pension systems. It recommended review of various tax credits, rebates, deductions, and exemptions to state sale taxes to determine whether they can be eliminated, curtailed, or more closely regulated. It recommended changes to the state's personal income tax. Remember that the state was on its way to a sound fiscal footing until the legislature and Governor Jindal repealed the Stellar Reform Act of 2002. They were the brainchild of Vic Stelly, a Republican legislator, and a Republican Governor Mike Foster. It recommended to reform the many tax deductions and credits for both personal and corporate income. Taking the task force recommendation seriously and the best way forward to guaranteeing a sustainable, predictable, fair state budget that will meet the needs of public education and all other services that our citizens depend on. And we have a saying in our organization that we care. Teachers and school employees care about the children that they serve and the families that they serve, and especially the community that they serve. We show up, teachers and school employees, show up to work each and every day to perform those duties. We fight. We fight for those issues that impact the classroom from day to day and from year to year. And most importantly, educators and school employees vote. And so we certainly want our voices to be heard and not just talk about those issues impacting education, but also those issues that impact our community. And so we believe it's up to all of us to see the change we want and the change that we deserve. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll be willing to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
All right, you made all these recommendations on cost, and what was it that you said, how much for K through 12? What was it?
Which one?
For K through 12?
K through 12 in terms of the salaries right now.
Yeah.
Right now, the average cost of serving the average right around $49,900.
And y'all are asking for raises, and what else?
Yeah, we ask for raises and also how to best fund public education in a sustainable way, so that we won't keep coming year to year asking for pay raise and asking for school supplies to educate children.
All right, they say that roughly 85% of funding for schools go to salary, yet we're also last in the nation for education. Our ranking, we're last. How can they justify that raise if we can't bring it up?
I think there has not been an adequate study to show actually how much money it actually takes to educate a child, especially here in Louisiana. But I think, as you have seen in research and studies across the country, there is improvements in the state of Louisiana. If you look at our way in which we actually evaluate teachers, the way in which we hold schools and school districts accountable, our accountability program at this point seems to be heading in a direction where we're showing improvements across the state. So I think once we really get an adequate picture of what it takes to actually educate a child in terms of resources, that's funding and also resources, we'll truly know if we're spending enough in Louisiana to educate every child.
But we still rank last.
I don't think we rank last. We're always improving. I see we've been improving in Louisiana. I think our standards are high, and I think that's something that parents and the community can be proud of. But I do believe we're showing great improvements.
Larry, do you think there'll be a walkout in the school year that we're in right now?
I've been getting that question asked a lot. In fact, from all over the country, they say, is Louisiana next? I think that's going to be dependent upon the members and school employees across the state. But it also is going to be important that our legislators and our governor hear what those asks are. And it's not just about salaries. It is about the resources, the crumbling infrastructure, and the support from parents and also from administrators. So I think we certainly will see an improvement.
One other thing on the pay raise, you support what the governor is asking for, and you're looking for more depending on the revenue outlook?
Yes, we definitely do support the governor. We're waiting just like he is, and the administration is looking to see whether or not there is enough money to give the kind of raise that we expect him to do over a period of time.
Dr. Carter, please repeat the question that you gave.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's right.
So, you say we'll know more with the RC needs. Are you saying that the amount of the raise, even from the union's perspective, is going to be pegged to whether there's extra money that's not allocated in there? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yeah, and the question is, do we see the fact that the Revenue Estimating Committee's report that we're waiting, as well as the government's waiting, to see how much money will be out there for us to talk about a pay raise? That was the question. I do believe we'll know more in how aggressively to ask for the kinds of money we think teachers and school employees deserve. But without that knowledge, we could ask for a certain amount, like today, and say that's a high amount, or we can be reasonable and think about what's actually there that we can ask for, and then how do we assist by advocating for other revenue streams to help bring at least teachers and school employees to the Southern Regional average. So yes, I do think that's going to play an important part of the conversation we're having internally in our organization and employees around the state.
I think the impact of vouchers, charter schools have on public school systems. Just how much money has been siphoned from public school systems through vouchers?
I can't give an exact number on that. I know there's quite a few school districts that do have, in particular, I come from the New Orleans area, and so we have probably 99% of our schools are charter schools. I can't give you a number on that, but there is an impact to direct run schools in terms of the monies that are being siphoned off from direct run schools to charter schools. And some of the regulations that they don't have, public schools do have. So they create some issues when it comes to adequate funding, I'm sure, between the two types of schools.
Are there any plans maybe in the next couple of years in legislative sessions, maybe push to eliminate vouchers? Is there any plan in the near future for that?
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah, the question was, is there a plan to eliminate vouchers or those charter schools that impact quote-unquote direct run schools? We've always felt that the public schools that we have in our state are good schools. They always are in need of improvement. Charter schools, while they service probably certain niches in certain communities, they've been, not deemed to be that much more successful than quote-unquote regular direct run schools. But we do feel that vouchers, though, do siphon off, monies from public schools that could better be used in the public schools than go to private and parochial schools that sometimes don't seem to have the same stringent accountability, markers to them that the regular public school does. Yes, sir.
When it comes to average funding per student, how much is enough? And what does an increase in, say, $1,000 per student bring?
I think that's an excellent question. How much is enough when it comes to per pupil spending? I think there's never been an adequate study to show that, to be totally honest with you. I think if a study is done to actually show what does it really cost to educate a child in the state of Louisiana, I'm not talking about any other state at this time, then we could have that debate a lot more robustly. But right now, there's no adequate proof to show, is it $1,000 more added to the per pupil expenditure, or is it $3,000? I can tell you in some private and parochial or even public schools, I've seen where they spend between $25,000 and $26,000 per child. In New Orleans alone, I can speak to Country Day, I can speak to Newman, and those are schools that actually, those parents pay between $21,000 and $26,000. In our schools, at the highest level, you'll see probably $12,000 to $13,000, unless you have some indicators for special needs students that may push that up some. But when you think about it, if you go to a private or nondescript school, the parents pay $25,000 to $26,000 a year, and in public school, it's $13,000, maybe $14,000 a year. And you get an opportunity to see, yeah, one can say parents are paying for that education, but if we talk about the public schools, if we're not to par with that kind of spending, then how can we actually compete? Yes. Yes, sir.
When you mention the average public school per child cost, obviously you have special needs, you have difference if you have a first grader versus high schooler. How much do special needs, which might be one teacher on just a few students, distort that number, and is that the number we're hearing, an average number, rather than taking the special needs cost out and then saying, oh, well, here's where your actual dollars are being spent?
I do sit on one of the commissions.
Can you repeat
That's
that?
actually, yeah.
I know it's a long question.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that portion?
And again, how you were saying
How much does special needs and other things that would not be in a private school impact the average dollar expenditure that we hear as a public person?
Okay, how much does the special needs impact in public schools versus the non-public schools not having those impacts by special needs and the costs associated with that? I think that does have a great impact in terms of how we view our spending on public education and some of the indices that's used to judge our schools and our students. I don't really have a number to share with you in terms of the total impact, but I can say that our system, the public school and state Department of Education, they're trying hard to actually look into some of those indices that impact and try to attach monies to that to be able to make sure that those teachers have the fewest students but have the greatest needs, that they're getting funded enough to be able to adequately educate that child.
So if I may, so what you're saying is the new amount that you quoted would probably not include special needs students?
I did not see the special needs students in that.
Back to Will's question about walkout, the session starts April 11th and ends in the middle or the end of June. So it's really unlikely we're going to have the budget finalized before the school year ends. So I guess to his question, do teachers have to see something happening to avoid a walkout? You know, the timing is not conducive to, you know, they won't be in school once they have affirmative budget properly.
The question was related to the potential of teachers walking out of schools across the state, in alignment with the fact that by the time we receive a budget analysis to be able to prove whether or not we have enough funding for a particular raise, with the timing being off, with teachers and school employees still think about that as an action. I'm visiting schools throughout the state. I'm visiting with members and leaders from around the state, and they're currently at a point where they're looking to see whether there's true discussions about that or whether it's just rhetoric. And I think there's, in certain districts around the state, some members, some teachers, some school employees who are willing to like walk out today if they thought that this wasn't a serious notion. But at this time, I think we've been able to have real discussions about the issues that they see as priority, as well as what's reasonable, what's expected. And those two things don't always match up. But we're certainly at the whim right now of our members having decisions and leaders having decisions about when are we going to start ratcheting up the conversation about a statewide walkout. But in some local districts, they're having conversations with their local school boards and they're getting pay raises like that. So we're waiting to see in terms of will there be a build-up. Because those actions did not start from Larry Carter, leader of the Louisiana Federation of Teachers, or even some of our local affiliates. They're started from teachers in the classrooms, and they say enough is enough, and they actually start this campaign around let's walk out. So far, I've heard in pockets of the states, more so than others, but there is a concern that they're looking for action if nothing is truly done, and if the governor, if the legislators, and some of us are not talking about supporting those efforts, then I think we will see some type of teacher action.
And do you think, when we talk about a walkout, I think one of the big issues around pay raise for school employees has to be like, who's gonna get the raise? Like, we've already heard from the head of house education. Some legislators are interested in giving it teachers a pay raise, but not support staff. You know, I know where the union, I know what you all think about that, but are we still risking a walkout if like only teachers get a raise, or only, you understand what I'm saying?
She asking is there still a risk that if only teachers get a raise, would there be a walkout for support personnel? I know in our organization, we represent almost 20,000 members. I believe that support personnel don't receive a raise, that teachers are willing to stand up with their coworkers and colleagues for some type of raise. At the state level and also at the local level, we've seen that conversation happening at already.
Larry, you think a walkout would be less likely next year because it's a gubernatorial election year? The LP supported the governor in the past. It would be embarrassing to him.
The question was around, is it too late if we wait till next year? And because they're in a gubernatorial election, would that be something that adversely impact, I guess, the governor? Because we supported the governor in the past, how do I see that? I think at this point, we've had great access to Governor John Bell Edwards as teachers and school employees, and certainly as a local and now a state leader. I've never had access to the governor's house, to conversations with staff when Governor Bobby Jindal was in. This is the first time that I've seen us really have a great opportunity to talk about the issues that impact teaching and learning. So for me, I think that we'll continue to work with the governor. And if there is a notion where even in spite of our support, teachers and school employees feel there's a need for a walkout, as the union president, I'll have to walk out with them. Yes, sir.
the teacher raises or lack of raises compared with other state employees for the last 6 to 8 years?
I'm not sure of the exact number, but I would say that I know state employees probably haven't received raises in quite a long time as well. But I know for teachers and school employees, it's been around 10, in some cases 8 years. But I've not looked at the state employees' salary to see if they've actually lost more or less than teachers when they've gotten their last. But in terms of educators and teacher and school employees, some of them haven't got raised in 12 years. If you talk about paraprofessionals, but teachers right around 10 years.
Or the teachers asking for raises higher than what state employees have received in the last 8 to 10 years?
I don't recall what state employers asked for. They asked for 3,000 or 4,000. It looks like teachers at this point, we were told about $1,200 for teachers and probably between $500 for other school employees and school-related personnel. I would think teachers are asking what they believe is fair and right for them. I don't know if they're asking for more than state employees. Yes, sir, in fact.
I know that at one time there was a movement to try to get locals to encourage their elected school board members to really essentially adopt resolutions to try to get the legislature to exempt schools altogether from the ITEP program so that the money that would go to school boards won't even be a part of that program. And if that were the case, I know particularly in the River Region parishes, for instance, the school boards would have 3 or 4 times as much money as they have right now to be able to do some things. Given that we've already had elections for school board members pretty much statewide, and there's a new slate of school board members, do you believe something like that might be floating again, perhaps where at the local level, the school boards, now that the governor has given them, permission to essentially get involved in that decision-making process? Do you think that could be a possibility of pushing something like that as a way of getting more money into our schools? Just getting them out of all the ITEP, regardless of the other taxing bodies, but getting the schools out.
Okay, the question was centered around ITEP, the Industrial Tax Exemption Plan, and how at the local level, our local presidents and local leaders having a campaign around asking school boards who are elected to deal with that issue in terms of funding for school districts. We have at least 5 or 6 of our local presidents and local area teachers and school employees who've been engaged in that conversation around the ITEP and how if they could reduce some of the tax incentives to businesses and allow some of that money to come back and be captured in districts to allow for teacher and school employee pay raises. That's certainly something we had a strong interest in and have seen some of our local presidents and local leaders go in a direction. In terms of a statewide initiative, we have locals that have autonomy and they decide what type of initiatives to get engaged in. And so for the most part, we've had quite a few of our locals engaged in that actually, but not entirely the entire state has taken that initiative on. Yes, sir.
The approximate unfunded pension liability of the state of Louisiana is around $21 billion. I don't want to be held precisely, but I believe about 35% of that is attributable to the teachers' retirement system. In an ideal world where you got everything you just said that your organization would hope that Bessie would push for, i.e., if I understood you correctly, a 2.75% annual increase, how would you address the impact that that's going to have on that unfunded accrued liability? And do you think it would strengthen the argument of some legislators from recent past sessions who have said this is an unsustainable retirement system and we have got to make the transition away from a defined benefit obligation and toward a defined contribution system?
Everybody, that question, it was centered around the teacher retirement and unfunded accrued liability issue that impacts probably some of the budgets that we're dealing with issues in the state. I would think personally that we would hope that we find revenues, sustainable revenues, to be able to pay down that unfunded accrued liability. I think it is causing the governor and his team, and even us in terms of trying to figure out how to keep a balanced budget and make sure that we can fully fund not just education K-12, but higher ed, as well as other community services that our community, needs in order to be a sustainable community. So I think when we look at the taxes, the deductions, and both corporate and also personal, and figure out a way to try to figure out how to actually bring down our accrued liability, that it will help with the budget in the future. So that is an issue that we think as quick as we can pay down that accrued funded liability, that it will help not just us in terms of education, but the entire state. Thank you.
Chemical plants produce vast more product per employee, automotive manufacturing, the same thing. Since Ronald Reagan, the middle class has flatlined. Teachers are still producing and teaching the same number of students. How can you justify a pay increase?
The question was centered around, in terms of teachers being able to,
Productivity.
Productivity.
Productivity and all other
And all other-
aspects of increase, but teachers are still teaching the same number of people. So how can you have a pay increase request?
I think when you think about productivity, if you go sit in a classroom today, there's teachers who don't teach the same number of students that they taught 5 years ago, 2 years ago, even 10 years ago. When I taught 4th grade, I had 42 students. State law said 26. When I taught 6th grade, I actually taught, I think I had 33 students. So each year it varied for me as a 4th grade teacher, and then when I became a 6th grade teacher. So I think productivity, I think we're getting more to teachers than we have in the past. I think we look at the paperwork that teachers and school employees have to fill out in order to say try to teach. That has encumbered some of the abilities of them to really be effective and having more time with their students. But I do believe they're not teaching the same numbers of students anymore. In some cases, we have classrooms that are overcrowded, more students than desks, more students than books, outdated books. So the productivity, I think we're getting more out of teachers than we did in the past personally.
Sorry, I'm asking so many questions, but, so if you all are waiting for the REC results, does that mean you think you teachers, school employee pay raise can be achieved without any new, tax revenue or tax changes?
No, it was about, are there any new tax measures that we think could be helpful in getting a pay raise? Because we're waiting for the Revenue Estimating Committee. We need to definitely find other ways to fund the budget and find a way to make it sustainable. And I think that's certainly some ways of looking at some kind of tax rebate issues, some tax revenue issues. Most of the time we hear we have a spending problem versus a revenue problem. And in some cases that debate goes back and forth. I think we have to figure out how to find a balance between both. The revenue that we gain from either taxes or reducing taxes in other areas, and how do we actually talk about spending in the state. And I think the governor is trying to do that as best he can. I know we support that as well. Yes, sir.
Have you reached out to the corporations that are not paying their fair share of taxes and asked them to help the schools where these corporations are?
Have we reached out to corporations about assisting and helping where revenues, I guess, are and supporting schools? I know many of our local leaders are engaged at some of their local levels with the business community. At the state level, the business community seems to be running a lot of different bills that are antithesis to what we believe in. But I'm always open to having a conversation with business, whether big or small, about raising revenue for public education period across the state. And also to make sure that our state employees as well receive the kind of raises they deserve because they do a heck of a job for the state. So yes, we will be willing to reach out. There's in some pockets of the state, our locals and our state federation have those conversations with certain businesses that are supportive, and there's others that we haven't gotten to the table yet with, but we would love to do that. Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you to educate me a little bit, and I'm going to throw a hypothesis of how this could have happened. You mentioned that the average salary over the last few years had declined from $51,000 to $49,000, if I heard you correctly.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go on the assumption that the only way that could happen is if you had veteran teachers with a significant tenure who retired and have been replaced with younger teachers at lower salaries. Is that correct? Or if not, can you elaborate on how that as I understood you, a real, not adjusted for inflation, but a real salary decrease for average teachers in Louisiana? Is what I just stated what happened, or is it something else?
Everybody had a question. The question was, in terms of the lowering of the salary over that year, was it because of teachers and school employees who were veterans retiring, and that caused the hiring of more newer teachers to actually cause the teacher salary to go down? I think it's a number of things, but I think that is a part of it. Also, I'm just going to look at the New Orleans market. Right after Hurricane Katrina, there were several charter schools that came online. Not one of the veteran teachers were allowed to teach in those schools, because the policy was we need to bring in teachers and school employees that we can afford. We can't always afford veteran, more experienced teachers. So we saw the chartering in New Orleans, probably at the time it was about 50–60% charters. Right after Hurricane Katrina, had salaries to drastically drop, just in New Orleans. And I think when you look at even benefit-wise, there was a lot of opting out of a lot of those normal benefits that teachers and school employees had that impacted that, I think, as well. But I think that does play a little bit into what you just said as well, that because they were either forced to retire, some 7,000 employees in New Orleans, plus in other parts of the state, probably a few more hundred right away. That could have had some impact, but I think there's a multiple level of things that impacted that. But I think it's also with the investments that weren't made into paying teachers and school employees more, that had an impact as well. So there's a multitude of things that I think impact, but I think that is probably one of the factors, I believe, that actually had an impact as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
What is the percentage of charter private students today in Louisiana?
I've seen that number somewhere. I'm thinking about percentages. I can't speak to percentages, but I know there's probably somewhere around maybe 100,000 students in the state that go to charter school. But I can't speak to a percentage. Can't speak to a percentage of how many. So I'm thinking New Orleans has somewhere around 36,000 students. 99% of them are chartered. Lake Charles probably has 2 or 3 charter schools. That's probably somewhere around 50. So probably 10–15% maybe, if you look at averages probably.
Would you say the initiative in New Orleans, charter schools, has been a success?
I would say there's been some pockets of success. There's some regulations that they don't have to follow, that quote-unquote traditional public schools have to follow. Most of them do have higher funding, because they do get some additional funding from private entities that actually boost their abilities to, I guess, supplant not just public but also private funds with their schools. They do market for better students. They have marketing programs where they put out, advertisements. Charter public schools don't do that and can't do that. But by and large, I think they're, just like across the state, there have been pockets of success in New Orleans. If you look at the latest test scores that came out with the new rubric, in New Orleans, while they may have had lots of gains in terms of students going from basic or below, as a system, they're probably ranked still at the bottom. But there are pockets of success in that model. I won't lie. There it is.
Much of an increase has there been in the exodus of teachers, either due to going to what they may consider greener pastures, or going to other states with higher teacher pay? Just maybe in the last 10 years since we've seen the teacher pay rate stagnate.
Numbers, I would say the question was how or what's the percent of teachers that have probably left the state to go teach in other states due to the salary?
Yeah, or just to go
or
to
just to go to another field, maybe.
Greener pastures.
I can only talk about a few anecdotal notes that I've had over the last probably 2 years as I've traveled around the state. I've seen a lot of teachers, let's say in East Baton Rouge Parish, that slid to the neighboring parish, West Feliciana, because of higher pay. I've seen teachers, in fact, superintendents when I traveled for back to school, they were missing 50 and 60 teachers because teachers left for higher pay in their parishes, like the St. Landry Parish. So for me, just putting a number on it statewide, we haven't looked at it, but I do see from my visits around the state, and we have probably 31 different districts that we definitely represent members as the federation. And we've seen quite a mobility inside the state, and then there's those who just leave the state. I can't put a percentage on it, but they're growing. I'll take that, they're growing in terms of leaving the state. But for the most part, they shop around the teachers now in different neighboring parishes to see who's paying the most, and they're leaving. And then that leaves a big hole in that parish that really can't compete. And so we're seeing that, and you can check with a lot of superintendents at the beginning of the school year, they're struggling to get teachers to fill classrooms. Primarily, they say paid, but also with other supports like books and materials, and whether or not they met the technological needs of the students today and the educators who want to use that technology.
Okay, Julie, that's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.